Welcome to the Be and Become podcast, the podcast where we redefine success from the inside out. Here we are going to be exploring the power of radical self-love, well-being, and the deeper meaning of success beyond external achievements. My name is Rebecca, and after years of chasing self-improvement, I realized that doing wellness isn't the same as being well. True transformation doesn't come from fixing ourselves. It comes from fully claiming and reclaiming ourselves to embody the highest expression of our soul's purpose and potential. So if you're tired of the endless chase and ready to step into a more aligned, empowered version of you, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome to another amazing episode at the Be and Become podcast. Today, I'm with a very, very honored guest, and I am so excited to introduce her. Everyone, this is Jennifer Bernard, President and CEO of SickKids Foundation. Jennifer has spent 30 years leading in philanthropy and has managed teams in different sectors. She's now the President and CEO of SickKids Foundation, Canada's leading healthcare foundation. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca. I'm really honored to be here on your wonderful podcast.
Thank you so much. It's amazing to have you here. So for those of you who are listening, actually, Miss Bernard and I had actually met at a fundraising event, and I was just so inspired by her dedication to her purpose and her legacy as a compassionate leader of one of Canada's largest and best funded foundations, most important foundations, especially with regards to children's and mental health. I mean, there's no other foundation that I know more and more people are constantly wanting to put their efforts and their funding and their support into to really, really help our sick kids all across Canada. So I'm so pleased to have Miss Bernard here and Jennifer here. So welcome to the show. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about leadership, as we really do have such an incredible, esteemed leader with such a long tenure of expertise in managing teams, but also leading healthcare philanthropy in particular.
Yeah.
So in previous episodes, we've discussed a lot about culture and what it takes to have a work culture that really is rooted in purpose, but also is a culture where people feel connected, people feel seen, and they have that camaraderie that is so important, especially in healthcare practices and environments. And so there have been some leaders here on the show that have talked about how important it is for leaders to set the tone of their work culture in order for everyone to kind of be grounded and centered in their mission statement, grounded and centered in the organization's values and principles, both at work and even outside of work. I wanted to ask you in particular, how do you feel about that statement when people say, culture starts at the top? Is that something that is, adding pressure to leadership? Is it something that is, do you agree with that statement? What are your thoughts?
I love that you've started there. And I would say for the most part, I agree with it. I don't think you can have a great culture and a lousy leader. I think you can have pockets of extraordinary people doing amazing work, but I think the aggregate falls apart without great leadership. I used to have a staff member that says, a fish starts rotting at the head. And that's a statement that's true for culture. You can't have a rotting head and create a great culture. So I think that the leader's ethos, their why is so important. Their authenticity is so important. Their transparency is so important. Their vulnerability is so important. And their vision. Like you can get on board with a lot of things, but if you don't have the same vision as the leader, you can't build a great culture. So I think the title of your podcast is so beautiful, Be and Becoming, because at the end of that is belonging. And that's what you're trying to get to. People long to belong to something, something more than them. So I agree with the statement.
I love it. And it's so, and I appreciate you honoring the ethos of the show, which is really about how we actually have to become the roles that we play, as opposed to just sort of working in them or being assigned to them. We really have to become that person. We really need to be a champion of the values that we are hoping to generate and sustain in our culture. So I really appreciate. I
And
love the
culture
focus on. Yeah, and I love
evolves.
exactly, and to have that level of evolution. I'm curious, in terms of your own teams and the teams that you've seen over at SickKids, how is SickKids maybe different than other organizations that you've worked for in the past in terms of sort of sustaining that culture and that authenticity?
Well, Sick Kids is, for want of a better word, truly unique in the landscape. As a hospital, this is our 150th year, so we are one of the oldest children's hospitals in the world. We are also the #1 publicly funded hospital for pediatrics in the world. And so we come with the weight of being, the leader from a standpoint of the hospital side. The foundation, also over 50 years old, the largest, probably best known. We know our brand is one of the best known brands in Canada, up there with the Leafs and Tim Hortons, the real Canadian brands, and known for excellence, known for pushing the boundaries of branding, pushing the boundaries of philanthropy, really elevating our whole sector. So it's like no other place. You really are at the Super Bowl of not just not for profit, but the unique thing about Sick Kids is it has this overlay of having a very almost for profit engine in parts of the organization, but the ethos is 100% healthier kids, a better world. And that is our purpose. So we have this mixed hybrid kind of organization, which my IT department could be at Rogers, but my major gifts department is very grounded in our purpose. So that overlap and the level and scale of Sick Kids makes it completely unique. Raising more money than almost everybody in the country.
It's an incredible achievement. I've been following Sick Kids all of our lives, really. We've had
Yeah, yeah.
so
And
many
I'm a
different
Sick Kids
people.
mom, so it's been part of my life even before I worked here. And so it's so beautiful to have this combination of my personal connection to Sick Kids come together with my professional.
It's so beautiful when that happens, right? When we have that sense of alignment. I always love to talk about that and how, like, we really need to be shooting for that kind of success. I think that so many times, in our old paradigm, we always saw success as reaching some kind of milestone, but not having the alignment kind of kills that fulfillment for a lot of us. And sometimes it can feel empty if it's not fueled in that personal attachment, that personal alignment.
Yeah, the values of the organization you work with, whether you work in our sector, you work in any other kind of sector, should align with who you are as a person. You get that dissonance and that disconnect when they don't align. So if you love to work for a really high-powered, disruptive organization that feels like we can get to Mars, those are your values and that's your ethos. You should work there. But if you want to work like me with an organization that literally wants to change the world by making sure that every child can't just survive but thrive, you're going to get up every morning feeling a lot different than a person who's misaligned. I wake up regardless of the day feeling like what I do matters and is aligned with my values. So even if when it's not a great day, I love what I do.
I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed to have a person like you being the actual leader of this. I couldn't think of anyone that is actually more
Well, I'm
aligned. It's
lucky
just such
too.
a blessing. It's really no, but it's honestly it's such a blessing to see leaders that are aligned. It makes such a difference.
It does. And I've worked with people that honestly, we've all had bad bosses. I've had really bad bosses. And when I became a CEO, even when I was a vice president, I always try to remember how it felt to be powerless, how it felt to feel overlooked, how it felt to work yourself to the bone and somebody either not acknowledge or even take your work. I remember being afraid at work. I remember being shunned at work because I didn't toe the company line. And I promised myself if I ever had the opportunity to lead people, I would never lead an organization where people felt that way.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I think it's so aligned with the show as well is we've had so many people, like even myself, like when I look at, the pain that I had going through mental health and now trying to champion, youth to overcome the challenges that I had to go through. There's something really beautiful about being aligned with that legacy and actually transforming, or I like to call it alchemizing, our past pain and making that part of our leadership instead of something that we're wounded by and kind of project, which could be how these sort of bad bosses come around. It's great to actually be able to pass the torch and say, you know what, I'm going to be different when I'm leader.
Yeah. I think for a long time leaders were supposed to project perfection, and that was what we really wanted from our leaders. So that's what we thought we wanted. I think it's what we thought we wanted. And we got those leaders that, walked around and acted like nothing ever touched them, that they'd never had a bad day, that every day was a day that you were going to win. And I think that paradigm has shifted significantly.
Yeah.
I think the nature of work, how hard we're working, how complex the things we are trying to solve, like in healthcare, literally saving children's lives. I think that what plays truthfully now are people that are complex, people that have had to struggle, people that have had to overcome things, people who are not perfect, yet persevere and lead well. So I think people are looking for that authenticity in their leaders and not looking for that perfect leader that pretends that every aspect of their life is in balance and perfect, and every day is a good day, every day is not a good day, either emotionally, mentally, from a revenue point of view. And there are great days, and being a well-rounded leader, I think you're far more respected now than that projection of that perfect, that Instagram leader that nobody can really be.
Yeah, and it's always much more harder to relate to a leader. I think that ultimately people are looking for a leader that they can actually see themselves in and can actually
Right?
look up to.
Yeah, like a real person, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so happy to see this form of leadership come about and actually be embraced as opposed to be this sort of like, oh, well, I don't want to look weak in front of my team or.
Yeah, but it is a fine balance, Rebecca. People want to feel safe. They want to make sure their leader has a vision, a plan. Nobody wants to go into battle with somebody that doesn't have a plan. So it doesn't decrease the level of preparedness you have to have. It doesn't decrease how much you have to be accountable. It doesn't decrease how much preparation you have to have. What it does decrease is you needing to hide parts of yourself, even as a leader. Because if you don't hide parts of yourself, then your staff will feel empowered not to hide parts of themselves, and then you get the best out of them. Hiding takes an enormous amount of energy and steals time away from the things that you could be doing. So, one of the lessons I learned this year at SickKids is, when you come into SickKids, you're always like, well, I gotta show that I can lead this incredible organization. And one of our exercises at one of our culture days, because we take culture very seriously, we took the whole staff off site for a full day and we did a failure workshop. Just talk about failure, normalize failure. And I talked about one of my failures. And that was for the staff the highlight of the day. Me honestly and openly talking about something I totally messed up. I owned it and what I learned from it. And I can tell you that that is what the staff wants to hear, as well as what is my vision, how are we going to get there. They need both.
Mm-hmm. What do you think prevents leaders from sharing that aspect of themselves? Because even I find like sometimes when I invite leaders onto the show, I always want to make them feel safe as well. And I always try to
Yeah.
tell them like, hey, if there's something that you want to take out or anything to kind of help them
Yeah.
feel like they have sovereignty over the narrative. Because I understand that there are some situations or concepts or ideas that maybe they don't want to make public.
Yeah.
If there are any executives on listening to this episode, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of balancing that level of privacy, but at the same time, that amazing,
Yeah.
beautiful, warm, transparent, vulnerable, loving side that we love about our leaders? Such a balance. It's a balance, right?
Yeah, it is a balance. It's the Goldilocks rule, right? I call it the noble balance. Where do you find the noble balance? Well, first of all, everything has to be PG-13. You got to be professional. People don't need to know the dirty details. I think it has to be something relatable. It can't be like, something that no one else could experience ever in life. It has to be something that anyone could see themselves going down that path. It has to be relatable. So the story you tell can't alienate you even further from your team. It has, I tell a story about when I was a vice president and I tried to copy something that SickKids did and it failed. And so it's relatable to the people in the room. It's something about SickKids. It's something I did personally that people do all the time. And I talk about all the things, I go through the checklist of things I should have done that I didn't do. And so it's very relatable. It's got specifics in it. It's not just a rambling story. It also, I also tell them how it made me feel, because that's important that you feel like people have empathetic feelings. And that I also tell them what I learned so that they can learn from it. The whole point of leadership is that people don't have to repeat your mistakes. They learn from your mistakes. So what is the teachable moment in me sharing this failure? It's not just to share the failure and shock you that I failed. It's a teachable moment. So making sure it's something that's meaningful enough to be relatable and that they can use in their lives. So it's being respectful and not just telling your story so you can hear yourself speak. It has to be relatable to the people in the room, as well as show true vulnerability, not fake failure. Like, I almost failed, but then I pulled it out at the last minute and I was the hero. It has to actually show that it was a moment where it was a low and there was pain and you survived it, and how did you get back?
Absolutely love that format. I know that for myself, like when I go on stages and things, we always talk about the down story and the up story. And I love
Right.
this notion of reframing our ideas around failure, and seeing ourselves more as progressive. I think that's the main thing too. I find that when we kind of have these high performance cultures that I work with, there is that unachievable perfection that I think breaks a lot of our spirits.
Yeah.
What was the reaction in that? I'm curious to see, like, when you share that teachable moment, that well
Yeah.
framed, effective story.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to that in
I
your
gotta
team?
tell you, the sweetest thing happened. Philanthropy is predominantly female. Most people know that. About 80% of the people that work in philanthropy, I work hard to try to balance my staff, but I have a lot of women. And I got so many notes on my desk. Women write notes. And
Yeah,
I got
so
all these
sentimental.
little personal cards saying how much it meant to them that I would share, like, my honest pain and how embarrassed I was, and a real low point for me, and how much it meant to them and how much they learned from what I said. So the feedback loop and how that normalized me to them, because as much as you see yourself as everybody else, nobody sees you that way. When you're the CEO, you feel like you're just one of the team, but they don't see you that way. So it lessened the gap between us. I think they felt more connected to me, and more like you're just a regular person that has to do a different part of the job. So what I loved about it was it actually made people feel something, and it compelled them so much that they actually wrote notes and left me little, what I would say, love letters on my desk. So that was probably the highlight for me, and that I really did connect with them, because the worst thing that could happen is it alienates people more, but it was the opposite.
What a great outcome. And so it's so nice when you have those handwritten notes. I always
Yeah,
like to keep them. I like to keep those like in a little chest for like
I
a
do. I
rainy
keep all of
day.
them. I do. I
Yeah.
can't throw them away no matter what. I have a box. I have a box full of them. But I do think you're so right that you have to have a purpose for everything you do as a CEO. Every word you say, every gesture you make, what you say, how you say it has an impact. And even when you're talking about failure, you have to know where you're going with it. You don't want to make people feel like, failure is our standard. But you also have to realize there really is no failure. There's either learning or not learning.
Yes.
You fail honestly only if you don't learn. And you were talking about, what do you measure? We don't just measure the what. We don't just measure at SickKids, and this is part of my ethos, do we raise the most money? Of course we want to raise the most money. We have a hospital that is charged with saving the lives of children. We are the hospital of last resort. We are one of the top hospitals in the world. Of course, we need those funds. But how we raise that money is just as important. How we go about it, how we treat our donors, how I treat my staff to make sure that they don't feel pressured to ask people for money because we have to meet a goal, how we talk to our donors, how we treat them. All of that matters. And so the what matters, but the how matters as well when you have true leadership. Because anybody can say, just go out and raise money and I don't care how you do it. But when you say, we have a donor promise and this is how our donors are going to feel when we raise the money, but also I make a promise to my staff, this is how you're going to feel as an employee of SickKids and how you're going to feel about what you do. So you have to balance those two things. And it's difficult. But that is the job of leadership. As one of my donors said to me once, if it was easy to lead, everybody would do it. It's not. And so you have to put the work in.
Do you believe in this concept of, having it be like when you have that common adage where it's like, oh, it's lonely at the top. Do you believe in that? Like I had another person on my show as well, and she was talking about really just a lot of the struggles that executives go to kind of behind closed doors. And I understand that in some cases, it doesn't look like it's the case in your foundation. Well, it sounds like you're very close to your team. But
I've always been close.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, I've always been close to my teams everywhere I've worked. SickKids no different. But there are certain things, your job as a CEO in particular is kind of to be a shield for your team. You sort of, carry them on your back. You are the person that, makes sure that no one hurts your team. And I learned that when I worked for someone who didn't do that for us. Anybody could lash out at us. A donor could treat us terribly. A board member could treat us terribly. Just to anybody in the hospital. And you felt so vulnerable, right? Because you knew your boss didn't have your back. And so the loneliness, I wouldn't even call it loneliness, the responsibility is sometimes to be that shield alone and not involve other people or ask other people for help. It's my job to make sure that I create a safe environment for my donors, my staff. And in that can be lonely sometimes because you can't say to them, by the way, I've got your back, you just go out and do it. The other thing that's lonely is that it's your job to solve problems all day long. Very few people come to me and say, we need you to solve this great thing that's going perfectly. Nobody goes to you to do that. What they do, they come to you to solve the things that are not going perfect. And by the time it gets to you, you've got to solve it because they wouldn't have brought it to you if they could have, or that's the way it should be. So the loneliness is in the buck stops with you and you've got to figure it out. And you can't then go back to your team and say, I can't figure it out.
Right.
There's no one above you to figure it out. So the loneliness comes from that. And then, who wants a whiny CEO? You have to hold it in. You have to have your composure at all times. You have to be disciplined in how you express yourself. You can't just be like, oh, I can't stand that person. When you're, what I mean? You have to always have a certain level of decorum. And so that can, that constantly trying to really maintain that can be isolating sometimes because you just want to let loose and be just like everybody else, but you're not allowed to do that. You really do have to demonstrate how to behave under pressure. And you don't have many people in your organization that you can talk to about that. So you usually need a little network. I have a network of a couple of CEOs. We get together 3 or 4 times a year and we whine together. So that's how we get it out because we're the only people that really understand what we go through.
I'm so happy you have that support system. I really hope that more and more CEOs have that support system because I understand how important that is to be able to kind of take your shoes off and just not be on for a while.
Yeah.
Right.
That, you've really hit it. The loneliness in a way, it's not really a loneliness, but the weight is being on for everybody all the time because you want everybody to feel like they're the most important team when you're talking to them, donor, board member. And so you're constantly, and nobody wants a CEO that's like, today it's not going well, right? So it's that constantly being up for everyone that it makes it really challenging. There's no one to really lift you. Now, I'm lucky I have a great board and a great board chair, but again, they're my bosses. So that there's really, you're sort of stuck in a rock in a hard place in terms of where to put your own baggage. You really have to keep it close.
What would you say are your top favorite kind of self-care things that you like to do to ease that weight? I'm curious.
Gosh, it depends on where I've been in my life. And so, as a CEO now, I have to plan my time off and really stick to it, or it will never happen. So, when I was younger, you would wait and say, oh, maybe I'll take a week in July and do that. I have to book any time off I want months in advance because my calendar is a nightmare. And if I don't do that, of course there'll be something in my calendar in July. I can't do that in May. So I have to really guard time, downtime. I have to really put guardrails around that and say I'm taking this time, whether it's a week here or there, but I have to do that well in advance. So you really have to be mindful that you are going to burn out. You are going to need a break. You are, as I say to my team, you are going to have to stop and go and sharpen your axe, or you're going to completely deplete yourself. So that's something I wasn't as good at earlier in my career. I'm better now. So I guard my time. I make sure that I keep my friends and my family close and my truth tellers. So when I'm going down the rabbit hole and they haven't seen me for weeks and I'm not returning calls anymore and I'm missing events, they call me on it. You need the people outside of work to give them the authority to say you're in too deep, like you're disappearing from other parts of your life, and this is not healthy. And you have to listen to them. You have to give them that authority and say they can see me more clearly at this moment than I can. And for me, the biggest thing, and I struggle with this, is practice saying no.
Of course, especially when you're so compassionate. Like, I think that's
Yeah,
kind of the double-edged sword. It's like everybody loves us because we're
yeah,
compassionate and we're
right.
approachable and we're okay with our vulnerability. But
Yeah,
then there's also, yeah, and then there's also the part where it's like maybe they lean on us too much. And how do we put
yeah.
that boundary? And
And don't put up your hand for everything. Control that urge to save the room. When there's silence and nobody else volunteers, don't volunteer yourself again because you need to have some time for yourself. So I had a professional coach maybe 10 years ago, and that was the one exercise she made me do for 3 months. I had to list all the things I said no to because it was so hard for me to say no, to build up that muscle memory of politely declining things that were not necessary, that really didn't benefit me, that were pushing me to my limit, and really not feel bad about it. It's not my responsibility to make everybody happy every time they ask me to do something. So I would say that's something I still practice. So, I'm very selective. I get asked to do podcasts probably once a week, and I can't say yes to everyone. I'm very selective about who I spend my time with because it's precious and I can't make more. So that's why I am very selective now. And since there's so many ways to reach people, you can't hide anymore. I have people on Instagram, I have people on LinkedIn, Facebook. Everybody's reaching out to you, and you feel a little overwhelmed. So I've really narrowed the focus of people I spend my time with.
well, that just makes me over the moon honored that you decided to be here today at our in this show and speaking on such important themes regarding self-care and leadership and just the realness of being
Yeah, the real.
of being at the top and how we actually manage it. And you manage it with so much grace and so much
Thank you. I
integrity
appreciate
and
it.
authenticity. So it's such a pleasure to have you. I won't take up any more of your time. I know you're super busy, but it's been so amazing to have you, and I appreciate your warmth and candidness.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
just want to really just congratulate you on an amazing milestone for both the foundation and the hospital. What can we hope to see in the agenda of SickKids? What's coming up? What does our audience know
We
about?
we are moving towards our next big campaign. We haven't publicly announced it, but it will be something that changes the world. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but it is that kind of campaign. We live in an era of considered miracles, and Sick Kids is on the forefront of driving the innovation in healthcare that will not make sure just children are healthy, but everybody's healthy. Because I always remind people we all start as children, and if we can keep our children healthy, everybody grows up healthy. So this will be a paradigm shift in healthcare, and people will be investing in the things that were once only on Star Trek, where we will be able to do things because of philanthropy that we only dreamed about just a few years ago. So the next campaign will really allow us to live up to that moniker of healthier children, a better world, because it won't just be about Canada, it'll be about making sure kids everywhere benefit, and it doesn't matter where you live if you live.
I love that you're just transcending all of those boundaries and
Yeah,
making
I
sure that
like
every child matters. It's just so touching and inspiring.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
very much for
My
being here.
pleasure. My pleasure.
And I'll wrap up this amazing episode with just a quick message to all of you leaders that it is possible to be extremely authentic, compassionate, and still hold that grace and still hold the integrity and still hold your team together and to enjoy your amazing aligned success in doing it and propelling your mission first and foremost. Thank you so much for coming in, Jennifer. We appreciate you
My
so
pleasure.
much. If you want to get into the know, and I'll definitely put in any kind of links that you'd like, anything that you can
Okay.
do to support SickKids Foundation. They really are changing the world, and I think that we all can be a part of that change. We all deserve to be a part of that change. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you on the next episode, everyone. Be well and become your highest self. Take care.